Highland Country Fellowship, located in North Dallas on Bodeker Street, serves as a testament to how God unites churches through the Next Steps process at the Dallas Baptist Association. Next Steps is a process where DBA staff work with leaders of associational churches to discover what God's next steps are for congregations seeking growth, while facing the challenges of serving in transitioning communities with declining membership. It helps churches desiring revitalization explore options for the future of their church facilities and its congregation while furthering God's kingdom.
My name is Kyle Carper. I'm executive pastor of Highland Country Fellowship, and came to the church at the time was Highland Baptist Church. I'd gotten out of seminary, and a friend of mine was pastor, and he asked me to come on board as associate pastor, which I did after graduating. And through an unusual set of circumstances, I ended up becoming senior pastor, which I was not planning on. When I came to the church, we were at about 50 members, 50 attending on a Sunday, and I was excited to try some different programs and different ministries and things that hopefully would help grow the church. And over the years, about 3 years, we tried a bunch of different things. And we would lose a family, and then we'd gain a family. We'd gain a family, we'd lose a family. And so at the end of that 3-year process, we were at about 50 people still. And so anyway, we were getting to a point where we felt like, we really needed to do something because we weren't growing. We wanted to grow. We wanted to see what God had in store for us. And we could have existed as a church for a lot longer. We had money in the bank, but we were operating at a deficit budget and just didn't feel like it was the right thing to do. So called a very good friend of mine, an executive director of the Dallas Baptist Association, Bob Dean, and told him, the situation. And he said, well, it's funny you called because we're just starting a new program here at the DBA called Next Steps. And it was a process in which they would work with churches and their leadership and their staff to come up with a way to help churches figure out what the next steps were for their body. And so we engaged Bob and his team, and they came and worked with myself and also some of our leaders at the church. And we went through the Next Steps process, and we went through a series of about 5 or 6 different options for us as to what we might do. One of them was just revitalizing, trying to get the people that were there, working stronger and harder to get the church to move forward. We talked about relocating, being adopted as another church, by another church as a satellite. And finally, we talked about merging. And I learned in school that's the hardest thing you can do.
My name is Sammy Davenport, and I planted Country Fellowship of Dallas in March of 2015 was our first service. I was at another church doing contemporary music and just felt like God wanted me to do something different. I'd been doing contemporary music for a long time. I've been in the ministry for over 40 years, and it was almost time for me to retire, but I just felt like there was something left for me to do. I had talked to my wife about planting a church, and she was not in favor of it. After my meeting with Charles Higgs, and then Bob Dean and Scott Coleman at the Dallas Baptist Association, I came home and told her about it. And because of the resources, the accountability, the mentoring, the prayer that they offered, she flipped from there's no way I'm going to do this to I'm 100% behind it. And that was a huge blessing. We had our first meeting in March of 2015. Met at a friend's church on Sunday afternoon, but the building was not it was a ministry building, but it was not in what we were looking for as far as the atmosphere. We met, plus meeting in the afternoon's tough. We did that for almost a year, and then one of my musicians is also a real estate agent, knew of a building that we could possibly use that his boss owned, and that was 1050 Barbecue up on Central Expressway. And we moved in there and immediately started to grow. When we moved in, we were about 50 people. And when we moved out, we were at about 170 members, with our highest at about 210. And it was that high Sunday on at church, about 5 minutes before I'd start worship, that the manager came up and said, you've got to get out. All the same time, all the folks at DBA had been praying for us. And so that Monday, I called DBA and said, okay, you really need to pray now because we've been kicked out of our place, and I've got 200 people that we don't have a place to meet.
One day, Bob told me that there was this country church plant that was looking for possible space, and I thought it might be a good idea if I talked with them. And the last thing I wanted to do was talk to somebody about leasing space in our building. We already had another church meeting in the building on Sundays. We had a school that was meeting in the building, and that was nothing but trouble. So the last thing I wanted to do was meet with somebody who wanted to meet in our church. But anyway, I got a text from Sammy, and we agreed to meet. Walked out the door of my house, told my wife I'd be back in 45 minutes because I had a sermon to write, and met Sammy, and 4 hours later, we were still talking. And about the middle of that conversation, felt like God was putting something together. And it was a really cool experience to see that while we had no idea what God was doing in putting two churches together, He was behind it for a long time. And at the end of that meeting, we both called our wives and said, I think God just answered our prayers.
Transitions aren't always easy, but when God is at work, we know that if we're committed to loving others and are obedient to sharing the gospel as Jesus calls us each to do, change can happen.
We talked about merging, but anytime we talk about that, I was thinking about the term unite instead of merge, because it just felt like a corporate merger or something, and it was uniting two bodies and their hearts. Miracle after miracle after miracle. No staff lost their job. We had a teaching pastor that was there he didn't want to teach regularly. Our children's pastor had just gotten married and moved away. They had a children's pastor. His worship leader had just finished her PhD and had taken a full-time position at DBU, and I was the worship guy. Their financial person was ready to retire. We had a financial person. They had a big space, and there are not very many people. They needed people, and we needed a space. And it's just like everything just went together. It was an amazing. And the cool thing about it for me was to look back on it and know this is absolutely of God, because there's no way we could have figured this out.
Yeah. That's the cool thing, is watching how God put it together. And it wasn't just a few things, it was so many things. All the staff working together, and just little clues He gave along the way. One of my favorite stories is one of the things we had done before I'd even met Sammy was we were part of a ministry called Revive Dallas, in which we did some street evangelism. And before we went out to do that, we had offered to be a host church where the people going out and doing the missionary work could come to our church for lunch. And so they were going to do that. And because of that, the group that was putting this ministry on in Dallas came and prayed with us. And at that time, 3 people in the group that prayed with me prayed and said, I just got this sense from God that something is about to happen here. They said, I felt like I had a dream that like God just took the roof off this place, and we looked down, there's all these people, and I'm thinking, man, that's crazy. That'd be awesome, but I just didn't see how it would happen. But I was weeping after that story, because I was like, wow, if God is actually going to do something in our lives like that, it'd be unbelievable. At the end of this ministry, because we were a host church, they gave each of the pastors a gift, and it was a painting. They just told an artist a little bit about the church, and that artist just came up with a painting where they felt like the Holy Spirit was leading them to paint about that church. And the painting we got was a picture of a shovel going into the dirt with butterflies on it, and it was basically God was digging up the ground that was there and bringing new life. And that's exactly what happened less than 3 months later. So pretty cool.
Kyle Carper, Sammy Davenport, and Bill Rector, pastors of Highland Country Fellowship, have seen growth as they continue serving in North Dallas. They're excited to see what the Lord does next. Dallas Baptist Association is committed to planting churches, strengthening our existing churches, and reaching Dallas and Rockwall counties with the gospel of Jesus Christ.